Hello, brothers and sisters, fellow Equatorians. This is Sabata with the Equatoria Advocacy Foundation. Today is Sunday, the 3rd of May, 2020. If it is not for the coronavirus, yesterday, Equatoria Advocacy Foundation could have actually conducted an Equatoria beauty pageant in Phoenix, Arizona, which was scheduled for May 2nd, but unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, we had to cancel it, and I had passed the information some times back. Hopefully, maybe in some times to come, we would see how the whole corona pandemic is going to be dealt with. Once it's dealt with completely, then we will bring back the idea of holding an Equatoria beauty pageant for the beautiful ladies of the Equatorians, so that they would come and compete for it or contest for it. This is this. But today, which is the 3rd of May 2020, on behalf of the Equatoria Advocacy Foundation, of course, my name is Sabata Ramba. I am the Director for Resource Mobilization and Project Management. I would like to today clarify what's called the political stances of the Equatorians since the 1950s. I am sure if you bring sample Equatorian individuals, bring them in clusters, in clusters of 5 or 10s, and you ask them to precisely summarize what are the political stances of the Equatorians since the 1950s until today, they may not be able to explain it very clearly, because as these events take place, these political events within people struggling for economic survival here and there and trying to harmonize politically, it's very hard to read where the people of Equatorians stand, where their interest is exactly as far as their political stances. But I would like to summarize this very briefly today. Basically, the idea of administering society in what is called federation is an idea that the Equatorian politicians have produced it right from the time even the British had not given independence to Sudan. At a time when the British were trying to give independence to Sudan, southern politicians, driven by Equatorian politicians, injected the idea that they did not want to have one assembly with the North, and they wanted to have a separate assembly from the North. That is, they wanted independence. And that idea was, by the way, driven by Equatorian politicians. It didn't work out that way. That was justified in 1947 during the Juba Conference. And when the result of Juba Conference came out, there were lots and lots of political groups. Those are Equatorian politicians who did not like the idea, including Egri Jaden, did not like the idea that the result of the 1947 Juba Conference came out that South Sudan was running under the same assembly with the North, because those of Egri Jaden knew that South Sudanese were not as well informed as the Northerners as far as politics and general aspects of what is called attributes of survival. And for that reason, Southern Sudanese will be disadvantaged so much. That was that. But then, again, Southern politicians, as headed by Equatorian politicians drove the idea of the Anyanya One, which was basically calling for independence of South Sudan, and that was following the fact that Juba Conference, of course, ended up with the result of United Assembly with the North. Then Anyanya One called for basically independence immediately, you see. And as that fighting took place, which was of course led by predominantly Equatorians, in 1972, then Nimeri said, you know what, I will give you what is called regional autonomy, which was actually a form of, not complete independence, but a form of federation. You see, given that the South, the region of the South, were given what is called an autonomy, regional autonomy. That is, they are responsible to organize themselves politically in so many areas. And this is something Equatorians have always desired. And when they were given that regional autonomy, of course, they had the structure was that there was an assembly and there was also a high executive council, and in the high executive council they had Abel Alier came first, and then they had Joseph Lagu came, and then later Peter Gatkoth came. So you can see the order. It was Abel Alier, Dinka from Bor, and you had Joseph Lagu is a Mahdi from Equatoria, and then you have a Nuer person, Peter Gatkoth Kwal, and then came Abel Alier again, or Gismal Abdallah Rasas. I mean, one of the two, but Abel Alier came twice, and then came Joseph Tombra, which was now during the days of the Kokora. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the Equatorians, during the 1972 Regional Autonomy Administration, realized that when we were running our autonomy, the regional autonomy, yani al-Hakuma bita Junubiyin, bita regional autonomy, as we were running it, we were having a lot of cultural conflicts with the people of what is called former Bahr al-Ghazal province and with the people of what is called former Upper Nile province. And the cultural conflicts, basically, I wouldn't say it is with all the people of the former Bahr al-Ghazal province. No, not all. But there are some particular people in the former Bahr al-Ghazal province that didn't just connect well culturally. And of course, everybody came to Juba because Juba was the capital. And in what is called the former Upper Nile province, not everybody also connected well with the people of Equatoria in the equatorial territory where the assembly was in Juba. But generally in Upper Nile, I don't think there are some discrepancies. It was just, maybe, oh yes, there are particular people from the Upper Nile province, Bor, okay? These people did not connect well with the Equatorians, as everybody, of course, came here in the Barlaman of what used to be called the People's Regional Assembly, which was nicknamed Barlaman Talagu, okay? So, as people came to Juba, which was the capital, now coming towards the days of the Kokora, there had been lots and lots of problems that had been going on. And again, Equatoria politicians, there are a good number of Equatoria politicians who have realized that, no, we are having these cultural conflicts going on. We rather have 3 separate assemblies instead of just one in Juba. Let another assembly be done in Bahr al-Ghazal, and then another assembly be done in Upper Nile, so that those assemblies will take care of the affairs of those people in those territories of the former Bahr al-Ghazal province and the former Upper Nile province. And that policy was executed through what is called a decentralization policy, which is discouraging the idea that power of the region of the south should not be centralized in Juba, but it should be decentralized also in Upper Nile and also in Bahr al-Ghazal, which is a very, very good policy. I personally don't see anything wrong with the people of Upper Nile at that time having a parliament, an assembly, and the people of Bahr al-Ghazal at that time having an assembly. That will be very good, and they are still going to be united in what is called the High Executive Council. There is nothing wrong with that completely. And that policy was delivered and nicknamed Kokora, meaning, Kokora is a Bari-speaking word meaning division. It is dividing administrative responsibilities. Kokora means division. Dividing what? Dividing administrative responsibilities. There is nothing wrong with that at all. Now, as we are today in 2020, that Kokora seems to be taken as though it was a very, very bad policy that was implemented. There is nothing wrong with policy of Kokora. If there is anything wrong with it, it is the way it has been executed. And the way it has been executed took that toll because there are particular people who have refused that policy, but they have not refused it in a way where they try to give their reasons as to why that policy is not good and see how it's going to go. I would respectfully say there are Equatorian politicians who have refused that policy, but they also brought their arguments and was pretty much discussed at the assembly, but predominantly Equatorian politicians did not stand with that, and it was taken to the people, but the Equatorian politicians were able to dispute that policy in a reasonable way. But the sharp from the former province of Bahr al-Ghazal in particular, and then particularly from the area of Bor in the Upper Nile, refused that policy by saying, you know what, we are not going anywhere. Even after when that policy had been passed with majority from the assembly, People's Regional Assembly, they decided, this policy will not work with us and we are not going anywhere. Trying to rebuttal that policy by act of just trying not to respect the policy, even when the policy passed, you see. And that has led to the fact that the way the policy was implemented, the way it was carried out, it was then carried out in a very brutal form and kind of painted the entire Kokora as though it was a really bad thing. But the intention of the politics itself of Kokora wasn't that bad. But the point, this is not what I'm discussing here, but what I'm discussing here right now is that it was, again, the idea of the Equatorians that let there be division on what is called administration. All right? Now, today, in 2020, again, the Equatorians are asking for federalism. When you look at the entire concept is the same. It is having division on what is called administrative powers. Again, today, Equatorians are saying, let us go for federalism so that there will be what is called space for administration. Let the states administer themselves without arbitrary, random pressure from what is called central government. What does that mean? Federation. Federal states should be given power. What does that mean? That means the central government will be limited in powers so that there are certain powers that will not be denied to the states. The states will administer and politically organize their people in a way that the central authority will not inject its authority randomly or arbitrarily. They can only come in on the areas where powers are given to them by constitution. This is, again, politics that Equatorians are standing by. It is not good politics at all. It is actually, when you look back in 1950s, this is the same policy the Equatorian politicians have presented, that they want federation. It gives you the room, because we really have cultural differences. And if we had that federation in place, the problems that we are seeing today, that we are talking about, wouldn't have happened. The issues that are taking place in Mukwaya, for example. What happened in Mukwaya? The central authority injected a policy by which it did deploy security personnel and went and basically drew people out of their lands and did send the people from Mukwaya to go to Yei River. And the execution of that was done brutally, you know. People were driven out of their properties, and people's properties were looted, you know, by security apparatus. If we had federalism, that wouldn't have happened the way it happened. Why? Because the central government or the central authority would simply notify the state authorities that, look, we want Mukwaya areas A, B, C, D to be cleared because we want to go and carry operations in certain areas. And the execution of the policy will be done by state government. And if the state government goes and carries out that, then the state government will carry it in a manner that they will kindly tell the people to kind of go away, or even provide transportation based on the budget they have at the state. Provide transportation from the people from Mukwaya to Yei. And that wouldn't have happened the way it has happened. But that policy was injected the way it has happened because of lack of federalism. Today, we are also talking about thousands of cattle being brought and kind of placed in certain territories in the equatorial area, and that is creating discomfort amongst the Equatorians. And they are now saying that even the cattle keepers who have come following their cattle carried guns and arsenals like even RPGs and PKMs, all right? And that has made the people around those areas uncomfortable. Indeed, they will be uncomfortable because they don't know how long those people are going to be there. Those people might end up settling and then bringing their families, and they are well equipped. What the heck? With federalism, that wouldn't have happened the way it has happened, because if there is a plan of having these cattle being brought to the equatorial areas, it will be done with agreement with the governors of the equatorial states. And these are some of the advantages that federalism could have provided. A couple of days ago, I've seen a video that was posted on Facebook. A gentleman was basically complaining about money, resources of the country taken and not deployed to the state and county authorities. That the money gets taken and then disappears somewhere on the top. Even though people are living right or directly under authorities of counties and states. Well, the complaint of that person is genuine. But again, why is that happening? It is happening because of absence of federalism. Because with the presence of federalism, that money, before it disappears on the top, the state governors will always provide what is called demands, all the country relies on that revenue from oil. And the states are running departments of education. Well, in federalism, eventually departments like education and animal and forestry and all those departments that are directly running the operations of those things will eventually have to be under the jurisdiction of the states. And they will need money to get education going, to get a number of things going. Where will that money be coming from? It will be demanded from the top government, who is basically collecting the money. So it will be hard for the top government just to misappropriate that revenue, that money, and not giving it to the state governors, because there are so much that touches people's lives that needs to be executed at the level of the states. And money is crucial. Money is needed for those kind of things to be taken care of. But because of lack of federalism, we are screwed. So, what am I saying, fellow Equatorians? I am saying you need to revitalize your energy in the idea of supporting federalism. Boost the tone of federalism. It is not too late. As we speak today, state governments have not yet been created. Natalia Oyet has written a document that is saying, basically, he is stating, and that document is authenticated, by the way. There is no doubt about it, because even the IO has sat down and discussed the content of what Natalia has said in that document, the fact that the revitalized transitional government of national unity right now is ignoring many aspects of what has been signed, including federalism is not going to be implemented. All right? So, fellow Equatorians, you got to revitalize that tone again of the necessity of federalism. Why? Because right now, it is not yet too late. We still have what is called holdouts who have not yet gone in, because they are also arguing that the idea of federalism should be implemented, and they are there in Soma. If you hear that there is St. Egidion is arranging for a platform where negotiation is going to be carried with them so that they will be included in this revitalized transitional government of national unity. And they are carrying with them the idea that federalism should be implemented. So that's why I'm saying it's not too late. You, fellow Equatorians, you have to revitalize that tone of federalism, so that when that forum is getting negotiated in St. Egidion, make sure that the tone of federalism gets heard very clearly, so that if there is going to be any future deal through which those holdouts are going to be coming in, they should come in with that condition going to be implemented, that the system of governance throughout the revitalized transitional period must be under federalism. Because this is the only way, fellow Equatorians, you would find what is called freedom to discuss, freedom to decide on what is called your destiny, how you want to live your lives. This is something you have been calling for since 1950s. You have called for it during the regional autonomy. You still have a chance today. But if the people of Equatoria are so muted and they are not revitalizing that tone, they will be the losers. They will have only very few politicians who are Equatorians talking about it, but the rest of the people will be relaxed. That is not going to go anywhere. You, the people, have to make sure you push the agenda. You know, when you study history, you will come to realize that all the issues that are considered to be of reforms, when you look at even in international politics in other countries, Those ideas are pushed through what is called populist movements. A group of people call for something, it gets pushed until it gets executed. So you, the Equatorians, you have called for federation in the 1950s. You have called for federation through Kokora. Again, well, I wouldn't say it's a federation, but it's basically the same concept. When you demanded for the Kokora, it was basically dividing what is called administration powers. You want administrative powers to be divided such that there will be limits put to it. You just don't divide it. You divide it and then put limits, so that then it gives you the chance to decide on what is called your political affairs and political matters in your territory. And again, through federalism, you are calling for it, but your voice have to be louder. I know Equatorians, we have been calling for unity, but unity cannot be without any purpose. Unity have to be under very clear purpose. And it has to be under federalism, because with the federalism, then you will have the chance eventually to administer yourself as far as administrative powers is concerned. You will eventually administer your political affairs and matters within your territories the way you want. But if you are silent, matters will always be imposed onto you. And if matters are imposed onto you, then what you will see is what you have seen in Mukwaya, what you are seeing right now, kettles being brought, and you're wondering why those things are being brought, why those kettles are being brought to Equatoria area just to be placed over there. And those who are bringing the kettles are well armed, and you are kind of wondering. You are wondering because you don't have state governments with authority. Only federalism will give them that authority, and it will be authority that will be protected. Under federalism, you will have the authority to run your matters, and that authority will be protected. That is, the central government will be given certain limitations by constitution so that they will not intrude in your issues arbitrarily, randomly. Brothers and sisters, I am saying this so that when we call for unity of the Equatorians, the unity should happen for a purpose. That is, we are uniting as Equatorians in order to revitalize the call for federalism. It has to be implemented. We still have the chance. The state authorities are yet to be formed, and yet there are still some holdouts who are going to be negotiated with, and they are talking about federalism. You have to support those guys. Those voices must go out loud and clear. That is your final chance. If you fail to get that federalism going on, and those Soma gets included or assimilated into the system right now without federalism, what you have seen in Mukwaya will repeat itself. It might even happen worse. It might even go at a worse stage. What is happening right now in Lobonok and some other parts where kettles are brought, and worse might happen to an extent. You might end up leaving your territories and going take refuge somewhere in Uganda and Kenya, or maybe in Congo. Join those brothers and sisters over there, and that'll be it. And by the way, there are certain tribes in the equatorial area that can hardly assimilate on the other side because they do not have what is called brothers and sisters. They are only tribes that are belonging in the equatorial area. So brothers and sisters, I'm really saying this, you have to take this serious. Fellow Equatorians, unity has to be for a purpose. And the purpose is we have to start revitalizing the tone of federalism seriously. Sitting down confused, idle, without saying anything is not even going to help. Because it's an endorsement to the status quo to continue, and this is a recipe to future extinction of Equatorians within the territory of the Equatoria. I want you guys to remember very well that Equatorians used to be very huge, including those in the northern part of Uganda, including some parts in Congo. Politics have been played. Territories have been redrawn. Those in the northern part of Uganda are no longer called Equatorians. They are called Ugandans. There are some in Congo who are no longer called Equatorians. They are called Congolese. You only left very few in South Sudan. If you don't stand strong, history will pass you in a way you'll be extinct. Brothers and sisters, I hope you take this serious. It is your responsibility to revitalize the tone of federalism, the call for federalism, and make sure that the Soma, who are going to be discussing in St. Egidion, will table that as the first priority. Why? Because you, the Equatorians, want freedom to decide on your political matters without arbitrary push from the central government. Federalism is your only way out. Thank you very much. God bless you. Happy Sunday.